All right, welcome back to the channel. It's obviously, these are one of my favorite videos to make. I get to just talk about Malazan and pour my heart out about the series that I love. So I'm excited to bring you part 3 of Gardens of the Moon. That's the mission. It covers chapters 8, 9, and 10. So if you haven't checked out my first 2 videos, please go do that. Get caught up. I will be covering in depth each part of the series, each part of Gardens of the Moon, and continuing on with the rest of the Book of the Fallen. But just briefly before we dive right into the events of the part, I just wanted to give my brief thoughts on Malazan. Shocking to nobody that I'll go on a tangent saying how much I love it, but I just thought I'd bring it up because I have been reading other things, and every time I come back to Malazan, I'm reminded how much I love it and how uncomparable, at least for me, it is to anything else that I've read. Maybe I just haven't read the right books or the right series, but there's just something so uniquely gratifying about Erickson's writing and the series as a whole. It's unlike nothing else, and I absolutely love it. Obviously, it's not for everybody because Erickson doesn't come out right out and tell you just about anything. So you're lost. You can be a little lost, wading through and figuring out what exactly is going on. But the more you read of it, the more you get used to that, and especially you get more and more details as they're slowly and not obviously sometimes revealed to you. But that's obviously one of the motivations for me to make this series is just try and hopefully keep everyone going a little bit smoothly along in their first read throughs or maybe their second, third rereads. So yeah, I just wanted to say that before we jump right into the actual events of the chapter. The part kicks off with we're back with the bridge burners. They are departing. They're crossing a great sea that you can't see the other end to. And we get, like I was mentioning earlier, we get a glimpse. Erickson won't come right out and tell you just about anything, but we do get a small interaction that, is just a little fun. You might not think anything of it, but I think it gives you a good idea of Whiskey Jack's character. You have the bridge burners who are basically playing a prank on Trots because he seems like one of those Trots anyways, like one of those maybe not the brightest, overly trusting people. So what they did, they had filled their ship with, all of their supplies and everything. They've weighed it down. It's on shore rather than, on a dock or in the shallows. And they made Trots try and pull it in. So he's struggling with this weighed down ship on sand by himself trying to pull it. And Whiskey Jack, Callum, and Quick Ben walk up, and Callum and Quick Ben are laughing at this sight too. And Whiskey Jack he steps in and says, Trots, stop, get in the boat. And then he tells the bridge burners, like, okay, now you have to pull the boat in, as a whole squad. And Trots can just sit back, kick back and relax. And Quick Ben and Callum obviously get a huge kick out of this. So they're laughing even harder now, and Whiskey Jack turns to them and tells them, like, why are you laughing, basically? You have to go help and pull him in too. So I just thought that was slightly noteworthy, small interaction, but just gives you an idea of Whiskey Jack's character. So we get an interaction with Whiskey Jack and the Moranth, and you see Moranth are these like mysterious people or race. It's a little unclear what exactly they are, and I think that's intentional. And we know there are these different factions that are color based, but we don't know a whole lot about the Moranth. So it was interesting, this conversation between Whiskey Jack and them. You see the brutal justice, and I think it gives you a glimpse at Moranth culture, where the people of Pale didn't treat the Moranth well, and it sounds like in the past they've had altercations that Pale have abused, and it led to a lot of loss of life from the Moranth. So when Pale was sacked, the Moranth came in and basically purged the city, but meticulously, we come to find out. For each person that died due to Pale's mistreatment of the Moranth, they claimed a life of the Pale citizens after it was captured. So it's just this brutal, almost uncompassionate example of Moranth justice. So I just thought that was, that was of note. And like I said, especially for a people and a culture that we haven't gotten very much of, it was just a unique insight into a little bit how their society and functions and the values that they hold. So I thought that was noteworthy for that reason. And moving on, we get an interaction, a conversation between where Quick Ben summons Hairlock, who, if we haven't figured out already, has completely lost his marbles. We already knew that, but it just, reiterated with this interaction. Which I know I've said this in my previous videos, but I love that it's like this crazy off the wall wooden puppet. Like, that's who we're dealing with. But he's also, at this point, because of this like dark magic that soul shifted him into this thing, and we find out as well that like this like madness is a common side effect, and that's one of the reasons why that sorcery was banned or kind of left the culture, if you will. So yeah, it's just absurd. I love it that it's like this crazy, extremely powerful and dangerous, and it's like like a foot tall little wooden puppeteer. Just very, very funny. So Quick Ben, or Hairlock, fills Quick Ben in on what happened, what some of the details on what happened on the attack, from the attack on Tattersall by the Shadowhound gear. And that wasn't the noteworthy thing. It was that Hairlock, in his craziness, is talking to himself and not really realizing that Quick Ben can hear him or that Quick Ben is even there. Just further reiterating how off the wall lost it Hairlock is. But Hairlock lets slip that if it wasn't for Perrin, and we know Open kind of delivered and gave Perrin this sword that is really powerful, because no mortal weapon should have been able to wound the Shadowhound gear. And obviously he does inflict quite the wound, and that's how Tattersall survives. But Hairlock says if it wasn't for Perrin, he would have just killed Tattersall, which was like, whoa, that wasn't part of the plan at all. And it, just further shows Hairlock is increasingly becoming this wild card that seems extremely dangerous, and just like, when someone isn't thinking clearly or is as mad as Hairlock seems to be, it's very unpredictable. And it kind of makes you wonder, at least for me, because we obviously we know nothing pretty much of Hairlock before he was mortally wounded and his soul transferred into this puppeteer. Obviously he had some sort of not romantic, but some sort of relationship with Tattersall, whether it just be, he was her superior in the army. And that's why they kind of came up with this plot to do this, to like soul shift him. We don't get a lot of information, and obviously Erickson is notorious for that. But it does make me wonder, like, what was Hairlock like before he turned into a puppet? Maybe you guys have some thoughts on it. You could let me know. So yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because that was one of the main things as I was reading through this kind of hilarious scene with Hairlock and Quick Ben. I was like, what was he like as a human being before he like fully lost his marbles? Like, was he always, did he have these tendencies before, and the soul shifting kind of exasperated that, or what? But let me know what you guys think. Okay, so then we also get Tak the Younger meets up with the adjunct and actually saves her from the Barghast. We find out later in the part that the Barghast and Kaladin Brood are kind of working together to push back against the Malazan forces. But anyways, Tak the Younger saves and meets up with the adjunct. And we get a little bit of... we don't know a whole lot about Tak the Younger's father, Tak the Elder, but he seems to be one of those almost larger than life figures. It seems that way anyways. We get quite a few references throughout the part from different people. Obviously the adjunct, and then later on at the dinner party, which we'll definitely get to and talk about. Once again, he's brought up. So yeah, I just found that interesting. They keep alluding to his father. He seems like an important individual. It makes you wonder if or when we'll get some more detail on that. But then I thought it was also of note that Tak the Younger is obviously missing an eye, and it seems to, like, the itching and flaring of that wound seems to flare up at like unique times. So it seems relevant when that happens. But yeah, and also it's funny because obviously you have one eye, which affects your depth perception, but Tak the Younger is like this exceptional bowman. So maybe there's something going on there, because obviously you'd think that with no depth perception, you'd probably, your archery may suffer. But clearly that hasn't impacted Tak the Younger at all. So we get some more information about him. And then really where this part heats up, and I think is kind of the climax, if you will, or the pivotal moment of this section of the book. You have the dinner party where all of these factions are represented, right? And tensions obviously are extremely high. The dinner parties with the adjunct, obviously you have Tattersail there. Tak the Younger, who we come to find out is the representative of the Claw there. Taishren and Dujek. So, and Tattersail, we start to learn a little bit about her past. She's very fearful of the adjunct, and we come to find out at the dinner party it's because when the Empress ordered the basically the genocide of the people who practice sorcery in Malaz City, Tattersail was a rookie in the army and was part of the squad that executed those people. And we come to find out the adjunct's family died in that culling, as they call it. So you have this really important interaction where the adjunct confronts Tattersail, and you really get a glimpse at, the adjunct as a person before her promotion to adjunct. You can tell this was a deeply painful experience, and she wants justice on Tattersail. She wants to execute her. And then you have Taishren, I believe it was, who stepped up, or maybe it was Dujek, but basically says, yes, this was horrible, but Tattersail was acting on the Empire's orders, and the adjunct is in this extremely weird position where she is basically the right hand of the Empire, of Empress Lysine. So she's confronted, if you basically execute Tattersail for these these crimes, you're condemning the empire which you represent and the empress, who you basically are an extension of. And you can see that her like last remnant of humanity, or her old self, the adjuncts, is kind of totally erased. So I think it'll be important to examine and analyze the adjunct's actions through that lens, trying to always keep in mind this interaction in particular as we continue to follow her throughout the series. That she basically gave up the last remaining humanity she was clinging on to, and this horrific thing that occurred to her family and herself. And she really has to totally remove herself as a person, and is only now seems to be acting and living in the capacity of the adjunct. So very much living and breathing her work and nothing else. So I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we continue to learn more and more about the adjunct. And yeah, we really do learn a ton at this dinner party that goes on here. One, you can see how affected Tattersall is by these events as well, having to go through them. Executing these people who were largely innocent, but just following orders, it seems. You can tell she's deeply affected by these events as well, all these years later. So once again, another important thing to keep in mind as we continue to look at Tattersall and see her actions. And not only that, you also get, and the theme here, and this is why this is such a great, this section of the book, part 3, really does progress the characters along a lot. So at the same dinner party, we get, a further glimpse at Dujak's character. If you have the mass market paperback, it's page 287. Speaking of Dujak, it says, a man who never lost his touch with the powerless or the less powerful. In dealing with the former, he always made his own failings an easy recognition, and with the latter, he had an unerring eye that cut away personal ambition with the precision of a surgeon removing septic flesh, leaving in its place someone who treated trust and honesty as givens. And I think that's important because, one, obviously it speaks to this great character that is Dujak, but really the epitome of what a leader should be. Very idealistic, but staying true to those ideals, not compromising, his own morals, if you will. And you can see this is one of the motivations, it would seem, behind Lacine, and by extension the adjunct and Taishren, why they're so threatened by Dujak, because as a commander, his men are fiercely loyal, and we come to find out, removing Dujak, or if Lacine or Taishren or the adjunct were to move against Dujak, rather than, he's not a piece you can remove and then you get the second back. Rather, I believe it was Tak the Younger said, if they try and remove Dujak in an obvious, act of violence, rather than regaining and reabsorbing the second army back into the main fold of Malazan, the Malazan forces, it would do the opposite. You would actually see an outright civil war. So I thought that was very interesting and important as well. And then you also see this interaction where Tak the Younger, and this also speaks to Dujak's character and leadership, you see this interaction where Tak the Younger is at this party as the Claw. So, and we know that Lacine and the Claw those loyalties are interwoven and unquestionable. But you get, see Tak the Younger make the choice by not revealing everything he knows. The adjunct or Taishren confronts Tak the Younger at the dinner and says, is Tattersail being truthful? And Tattersail can recognize that Tak the Younger knows that she's not, but then he goes, really not acting as a claw should, especially not the representative of the claw at this particular meeting. And he lies to the table saying, oh yes, she's being truthful. So we see him choose his loyalty to the Dujak's Second Army over the Claw. And that's reaffirmed later as well, when later in this section of the book, where he's having a conversation with Perrin, and he comes basically right out and says that, like, don't worry about my loyalty, effectively. I am part of the second first. I'm loyal, in other words, I'm loyal to Dujak and Whiskey Jack first, before I'm loyal to the Claw, which is obviously very much backwards in the structure of how the Malazan army should function. Okay, so after the dinner party, we get another pivotal moment, which is why this section of the book is so important. And you really just see a lot of the tensions being built here, a ton of plot development. We can start to see that Erikson is building towards a pretty big conflict that's coming to a head here, it would seem, relatively soon. So Tattersail sets off for Darujhistan. So we get this confrontation, and as you know, because you've read it, is pretty epic, if you will. So Beledrin confronts Tattersail, says, please come back with me. I don't want to have to kill you, but under Taishren's orders, if you won't come back with me, I'm going to have to kill you, basically. And Tattersail calls in one last favor and says, fine, but tell me, what's going on with Taishren. And he says, he found some scrolls in an old library, essentially. One was part of Gathos's folly. And for whatever reason, we don't know a ton about this, but this really spooks Tattersail for whatever reason, and she seizes this opportunity, seeing Nightchill's remains. She knows she can't go back with Beledrin, and this spooks her so much that she's willing to sacrifice herself, risk death. So she opens her warren and is consumed by it, and Beledrin is as well. But we come to find out that what happened with Hairlock, she has seemed to have done with Nightchill's remains. But also Beledrin was there with her. So it's like, does his soul get mixed into this? And then it's like, is Nightchill's soul? And you get throughout the remainder of the part of the book, people are constantly referencing that whatever happened here, we come to find out, like, Nightchill's remains walked off when Tak the Younger and the Adjunct come through. We get Crone's thoughts on it, and Kaladin Brood's. The consensus is, whatever happened here, it was pretty dark and meaningful, but something new was created with their own. It would seem, everyone seems to think, whatever happened, whatever this creature now is going to have its own motivations. It's, a whole new entity, essentially. And this really calls back, I think, to our interaction with Hairlock and this growing madness that we see out of Hairlock. And it raises the question, it's like, okay, you had one soul going to this wooden puppet, and it has gone horrifically. Like, he's totally lost his marbles. He's like killing great ravens, which are these immensely wise creatures that like consume magic, and he seems to just be like swatting them out of the air with magic later in the chapter. So it raises the question, how poorly, this has huge potential to be horrible. So yeah, it'll be very intriguing to keep an eye on the whole Tattersail, Nightchill, Belladrin situation. I just, knowing how poorly it's gone with Hairlock and seeing the results of that, I can't imagine what this is going to turn into. So yeah, that'll be important to keep our eye on, if you will. So yeah, then we have Crone, and we meet Kaladin Brood for the first time, who so far seems to be the only character that remotely matches the air and grandness of character as Animander Rake. He's the only person that we've met so far that seems to be Animander Rake's equal by the small interaction we get with him and Crone. And it's kind of exemplified, obviously, by his description, and he carries this huge hammer that seems to be almost impossibly heavy looking, but only matched by like his shoulders and and strength, it would seem. But one of the reasons why he seems to be Animander Rake's equal is Crone is actually spying on Animander Rake for Kaladin Brood. And obviously Crone is this great ancient wise being, so that was intriguing. And then we also meet Kalar for the first time. And we get this weird interaction where Kalar's obviously, underneath Kaladin Brood in the command structure, seems to be his second in command. We get that impression. But Kalar warns Brood ominously, to destroy Animander Rake as soon as possible, and then Kaladin Brood, brushes it off. Because especially Brood and Animander Rake seem to be acting as allies right now. I know Crone is spying on Rake for Brood, but they seem to be functioning as allies. So this is a weird thing for Kalar to say, and Brood kind of brushes it off and leaves the tent. And then as he leaves, and I assume is out of earshot, Kalar says, "Consider this your last warning." So that's the only glimpse we get of Kalar, but it's like there's something going on there. So once again, just something to keep your eye on. And then also that I want to read the blurb at the start of chapter 10, that once again we get another small glimpse of Kalar and maybe the type of person he is. So this is at the beginning of chapter 10, the little paragraph there, the little excerpt. It goes, Kalar said, "I walked this land when the Talanimas were but children. I have commanded armies 100,000 strong. I have spread the fire of my wrath across entire continents and sat alone upon tall thrones. Do you grasp the meaning of this?" "Yes," said Kaladin Brood. "You never learn." So that also, I think that mirrors the interaction between Kalar and Kaladin Brood, where, Kaladin Brood walks off and he says, "Consider this your last warning." I think that excerpt there at the start of chapter 10 mirrors that very well. You can kind of see it's a very contentious relationship, if you will, it would seem. So just another thing to keep your eye on. Like I said, like I will continue to say, with Erikson, it's a lot of putting small pieces of the puzzle together, which makes his characters so great and detailed, and they feel so alive, and everyone has their own motivations, because you get all these tiny little glimpses at their who they are as characters and what they stand for, and then it kind of builds into the greater picture, a very detailed idea of who they are as people and characters and stuff like that. So I just thought that was that was interesting. And another thing, yet another thing to keep your eye on. So just another small piece of the puzzle. But yeah, as a whole, I really like this part of the book. As I've said, it feels like we're building towards something at this point. Our feet are kind of on the ground. Erickson isn't giving a whole lot away, but we're definitely learning significant things about most of the characters at this point. We have a good idea of where people stand. So yeah, if you're liking the videos, please obviously do like and subscribe. Let me know how your read-along of Malazan is going. Let me know where you're at in the series, and what your thoughts on the series are in general. If you've gotten this far and it's not for you, I would like to hear your thoughts as to what you've thought and why why it's not for you. But obviously, if you are loving the series, you can tell me that as well. I will catch you in the next one.